Long before kings and empires, before words were carved into clay, they gathered beneath the stars not to build walls but to build a faith. The moon rose full over the limestone hills of Anatolia, casting silver across a landscape that knew no borders, no cities, no names written in stone. In the valleys below, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers moved like shadows through wild grasses taller than men, following herds of gazelle and aurochs across territories measured not in distance but in seasons. Yet twice each year, when the constellations wheeled into their appointed positions and the air turned cool with promise, they came together. They came to the place of pillars. Gobeklitepe, the belly of the hill. The old woman called Sarah walked at the front of her clan, her feet remembering the path though her eyes had begun to fail. Behind her, 23 souls carried bundles of dried meat, baskets of wild grain, hides stretched and scraped soft as clouds. The youngest among them had never made this journey. The oldest had made it 40 times, perhaps 50. There were no numbers to count such things, only the accumulation of memory and worn joints and weathered skin. They were not the first to arrive. Smoke already rose from cooking fires scattered across the hillside, and the air hummed with languages that shared no words but understood the same hunger, a hunger not of the belly, but of the spirit. "Why do we come here, grandmother?" asked the boy Ton, no more than 7 summers old, his hand tight in hers. Sarah smiled, her teeth worn down to smooth nubs. "Because here, we remember what we are." The hill itself seemed ordinary in daylight, just another swell in the undulating country, dotted with wild pistachio and almond trees. But as dusk settled like ash over the land, the truth revealed itself. From the earth rose pillars, massive T-shaped monuments of limestone, each taller than 3 men standing on shoulders. They stood in circles, these silent witnesses, their surfaces alive with carved reliefs, foxes with bared teeth, serpents coiled in eternal dance, vultures with wings spread wide, scorpions frozen mid-strike, bulls charging across stone. No one living had raised these pillars. No one living knew who had. They simply were, as permanent as mountains, as ancient as the first dawn. Some said the ancestors had lifted them in a time when giants walked. Others whispered that the stones had grown from the bones of the earth itself, drawn upward by the songs of the first people. 8 clans had already gathered when Sarah's group arrived. Perhaps 200 souls in total, maybe more. They came from territories a week's walk in every direction, people who might never meet otherwise, whose paths crossed only here, in this sacred conspiracy of stone and sky. The drums began at nightfall. They were simple instruments, hollow logs, stretched hide, bone strikers. But when played together, they created something older than language, a rhythm that bypassed thought and spoke directly to the blood. The drum beat was the heartbeat of the gathered tribes, synchronizing separate peoples into a single pulsing organism. Around the largest circle of pillars, fires burned. Their light flickered across the carved animals, making them seem to move, to breathe, to hunt across the stone faces. The clan leaders gathered first men and women marked by scars, by age, by some ineffable quality of presence that made others defer. They wore the skins of predators, wolf, leopard, bear. Teeth and claws hung around their necks, clicked together when they moved. Sarah joined this inner circle, lowering herself carefully to the ground. Her fingers traced the base of the nearest pillar, feeling grooves worn smooth by countless hands before hers. The stone was cold, but something in it felt alive, as if it contained all the gathered warmth of every person who had ever touched it. "The herds move north," said a man from the eastern clans, his language clicking and humming in ways Sarah's tongue could not reproduce. But gesture and context made meaning clear enough. "The waters shrink." "We have seen this too," Sarah replied, her hand signing what her words could not convey across the language barrier. "The world changes." An ancient understanding passed between them. The world was always changing. The people changed with it, or they ceased to be. But here, in this place, they could anchor themselves to something permanent, something that spoke of continuity across generations. that stretched back beyond memory. The young men danced next, circling the pillars with spears and torches, their bodies painted with ochre and ash. They leaped and spun, imitating the hunt, the kill, the triumph. The watching crowd stamped feet, clapped hands, fed the dancers' energy with their own. This was not entertainment. This was remembering. This was teaching the young ones what it meant to be human, to hunt, to cooperate, to risk death for the survival of the group. Then came the women's dance, slower, more deliberate. They moved between the pillars like water, like wind, their hands shaping invisible offerings to invisible powers. They sang in voices that predated words, tones that rose and fell like the land itself. They sang of gathering, of birth, of the seeds they had begun to notice and collect, of the slow turning of seasons that governed all life. Tan watched with wide eyes, his small body pressed against his grandmother's side. "What are they saying?" he whispered. "They speak to what cannot be spoken to," Sarah answered. "They ask for abundance. They give thanks for continuation. They remind the spirits that we are here, that we remember." As midnight approached, the pace changed. The drums grew faster, more insistent. People began to move into the spaces between the pillars, their bodies swaying, merging, becoming a single writhing mass of humanity. The boundaries between clans dissolved. The old and young, the strong and weak, the known and stranger all moved together in the firelight, their shadows enormous on the ancient stones. Sarah did not dance, could not dance, but she felt it in her bones nonetheless. This was the truth of Gobeklitepe, not the pillars themselves, magnificent as they were, not the carvings or the circles or the massive stones balanced with impossible precision. The truth was this gathering itself, this moment when scattered bands of humans chose to be more than the sum of their parts. They had no agriculture yet, no permanent settlements, no written language or metal tools. But they had this: the ability to agree upon a place, a time, a purpose, the ability to haul stones that weighed more than a dozen oxen, the ability to coordinate labor across clans and seasons, the ability to create something that would outlast any individual life by thousands of years. They were building more than monuments. They were building the idea of us. As dawn broke over the hills, painting the limestone pillars pink and gold, the gathered tribes began to disperse. They would return to their territories, to their separate lives of following game and finding water, but they would carry this night with them, this memory of unity, of shared purpose. And their children would return, and their children's children, generation after generation, until the pillars were finally buried by time and forgetting. Sarah watched the young people pack their bundles, their eyes bright with exhaustion and something else, a kind of knowing. They had been transformed by the gathering, marked by it in ways invisible but permanent. "Will we come back, grandmother?" Tan asked, shouldering his small pack. Sarah took his hand, began the long walk down from the hill. Behind them, the pillars stood silent, waiting. "Yes," she said. "We always come back." The sun climbed higher. The last fires burned down to ash, and the stones endured, holding their secrets, their purpose carved into surfaces that would baffle humanity for 12,000 years. But in that moment, walking away beneath the morning sky, the people knew. They knew why they gathered. They knew what they were building. They were building a world where strangers could become brothers beneath carved stones and firelight, where the scattered could become whole, where memory could be made solid and permanent. Long before kings and empires, before words were carved into clay, they gathered beneath the stars, and in gathering, they became human.